Hello, friends. We're just going to start in a little while. Uh, I thought it would be best if I start reading from Shinta's book, a few pages from there, till we actually start with the discussion. So I'm going to be reading. While I put on this slideshow, these are actually photographs from 2018 when I visited Kalimantan and along with Shinta went to many of the peatland fires. And so I'm going to put those photographs. You can see the kind of fires that are happening in the Kalimantan rainforests and that has been causing the toxic haze and a great threat to one of the biggest, largest rainforests of the world and considered to be the lungs of Asia, the lungs of the world. Just 1 minute. Okay, no problem, since I have to do it manually. This is from Shinta's second book, published in 2018, titled Me, Modernism, and My Indigenous Roots. Tales from the Heart of Kalimantan, Chapter 4, The Issues. Not fireproof. Fire can warm. Fire can give light. Fire can be used to cook food. Fire is essential for human life. I suddenly remember a cartoon I saw in 1997. It showed the ancient SpongeBob, Patrick, and Squidward finding fire and then fighting each other to keep it. The fact is, that same year, I saw my house ablaze. I did not know then that at the same time, fires were raging across my whole province and my island, the place where my people live. Those fires have continued for 21 years, right up to the present day. The hottest year in history. According to BNPB, Indonesian Agency for Meteorology, Climatology and Geophysics, the forest and land fires of 2015 cost 221 billion rupiah. This number by far exceeded the 1997 amount, when the country lost about 60 billion rupiah due to these fires, and the number of hectares burned was also bigger in 2015. In that year, Kalimantan was also identified as the biggest carbon supplier in the world. Palangkaraya, the city where I have been living, was said to be the most polluted city in the world. Every time I read the phrase country's loss, my heart is filled with questions like, was the count only done in 1997 and 2015? The reality is that forest and land fires followed by haze have been taking place in Kalimantan for 21 years. I will not talk about research data or analysis based on internet research. I'll talk about what I really saw with my own eyes and heard with my own ears. Blazing red forests were real. Fruit trees that used to provide food for villagers were really left as brown wood. Leaves called tampun by locals that were gathered to be made into handicrafts, hats, and baskets for their daily living were really lost. Animals were killed by being roasted alive, and others fled from the flames towards the street, then were killed by passing vehicles. And the situation continues to this day. How do you manage to accumulate data on loss of human lives and the true impact of all this? People in Kalimantan have breathed in poisonous air for 18 years and have been struck by loss from many sides. Education, learning activities have been disturbed because of school closures. Economy. Rubber trees that have been growing for 8 years have burned and died in a day. Vegetables. Thin and dusty beans and other crops cannot be eaten or sold. Health. Adults who find it hard to breathe and cough all the time. Children with fever, flu, diarrhea who cry every night because of lack of oxygen. Yellow, brown, poisonous haze enters rooms in houses, so there is nowhere to hide. Those who lived in cities and earn enough money are not so affected. They can put in air conditioners, buy masks and medicine, or even go to the hospital to get an extra oxygen supply. At least they can do things that cannot be done by villagers. And we have not talked yet about those who have lost family members because of lung failure, or babies who, after crying a lot, have just stopped breathing. The number of victims who died during the 2015 haze only shows what happened on the surface. Poison has piled up in the bodies of people in central Kalimantan, potentially causing death later. My heart felt just like it had been stabbed by a sharp knife when I heard this sentence come out of the mouth of a man that I met somewhere outside Kalimantan. Tell your people to stop clearing the land by burning. I'm sure he had no experience of wearing masks for almost 24 hours a day. There was a long held Korean myth that a nine tailed fox in the form of a beautiful woman would eat the liver of men who fell for her. So, too, the myth that Dayak farmers are the main cause of forest and land fires is hard to break. A foreign journalist once asked me, who started the fire? To answer this question completely, we have to look back at the complex issue of natural resources and agrarian conflicts in central Kalimantan, and also the rights of indigenous people. Their people have opened up fields for use through burning for a long time, long before Indonesia was formed. Please note, through all the time the fires were contained and did not cause problems. Becoming a part of Indonesia did not make the goddess of fortune set foot on the earth of Kalimantan. In 1997, after President Suharto initiated the 1 billion hectares peatland project in central Kalimantan and a mega canal that actually drained the peatlands of the natural moisture was built, it was very hot and dry and the fires started. The palm oil and mining companies that came after have made the situation worse. The peatlands are still dry, so dry that dropping a lit cigarette can result in more than 5 hectares of forest burned. The Governor's Law Number 52, 2008 for Central Kalimantan stated that people could burn an area of 5 hectares or less. How could farmers know that the legal fires from their field could spread to so many hectares of forest? Or were they ever taught that the current peatland is not the same as the peatland they knew a long time ago? Imagine this, you know nothing about these changes and impacts. All you know is that a field has belonged to your family for generations and you have to work it to plant rice for your family. You burn as usual, and you do not know how to cope when the fire does not want to stop even after you have poured a lot of water on it. The fire then spreads into areas beyond your field. The police come immediately to arrest you, accusing you of burning the forest. What I say is not a myth. This is what is truly happening in Kalimantan. I think you're on mute, Shinta. Yeah, I thought I have muted you and I was trying. So, welcome to the discussion.
Right.
And I was just running some of the photographs beforehand and reading some pages from your book, particularly chapter 4, which describes about the peatland fire and your experiences a little bit. So the first 3 pages I just finished reading.
We just finished reading for the second times or for the first time?
Well, one time with a lot of pauses. Yeah. So great to have you for this discussion. This is going to be a series of discussions with indigenous artists, filmmakers, leaders, and activists. And nothing better than to start with you. And for those who are watching, I would like to introduce Shinta, though she needs no introduction. She is a Dayak Menyan leader and activist and filmmaker and writer, artist, and a wonderful human being, and a friend for many of us, a friend for even activists and leaders in Nyamgiri. And she has been spearheading a youth movement in Palangkaraya in central Kalimantan, as well as other parts of Kalimantan, to use cinema as a tool of advocacy and to use education, to promote education amongst indigenous youth, to create film festivals, film workshops, and a lot of things. There's a long list. In fact, if you go to Shinta's website, it is amazing the number of things she's done, and that requires a lot of commitment and hard work, which is really commendable. And it's a lot of work, which is often taken for granted. But yeah, I really appreciate that, and a lot of us do appreciate it. And also, she's the founder of Ranu Willum Foundation, Ranu Willum Media, which is about indigenous filmmaking. And then there is Youth Act, which is a youth movement against to fight climate change. And there are other initiatives also, which is part of. And I think you are also an editor of a magazine?
In the past.
Okay,
but yeah, we are still doing some kind of stuff like that, because we have this magazine, like bilingual magazine in Bahasa and also in English. But yeah, that's also one way to address the issues from Kalimantan to mainstream audience.
Right. And Shinta has also represented, Kalimantan and the Dayak community in international forums. And she has spoken in various international forums. And she's also visited India during the first International Indigenous Film Festival, which we started inspired by her initiatives. And the film festival traveled from Bhubaneswar to Puri to Nyamgiri. And over a couple of weeks, we were able to share. And in the festival, there were filmmakers also from Nagaland and Arunachal Pradesh and Assam and Jharkhand and West Bengal and Rajasthan and Gujarat. So it was a great coming together of indigenous people from India, Indonesia, and we needed more of that, but I guess the pandemic has brought many things to a halt here for the time being. But even then, it is amazing that the indigenous film festivals that Shinta organizes carried on during the pandemic as well, in an online format.
Right.
And great. So, okay, there are some messages. coming up. It's a bit confusing for me. This is the first time we're doing a live, trying to cope with technology, and I guess it's a bit beyond me now.
I'm trying to check on YouTube as well right now.
So, Shinta, how about? I mean, let's just go over to you and
Sure.
uh, how did it? How did this journey start? I mean, yeah.
Hmm. Right. Thank you, Surya, for the introduction. When I hear you like mentions, well, she's doing this, and then like I kind of have a bit self reflections, like oh my gosh, I do a lot of stuff, and sometimes when people ask, what are you doing? Like they said, like, what is your work? And then, like if we say our work as an activist, sometimes it's a bit tricky, like for me, because uh, yeah, for me personally, being an activist is not like a profession or a job, like, but it's more like a call because, like Surya also mentioned, you already mentioned that I was born in Borneo. I'm a Dayak Manyan, and um, to fight for my community is a part of my life journey, I guess so. And yeah, before that, I would like to say hi to everyone. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you so much for joining us, whether you are in India or maybe some from Indonesia. uh, I'm so happy to be able to speak here, and especially with Surya also. It's been a long time, right, since the last time we met. I think it's in 2019, at Kuching Indigenous Film Festival. But anyway, I feel in these situations, like us as an indigenous person, I myself, like feeling that um, this moment makes me think hard and try harder, because everything now, needs skill and knowledge in technology, especially if we say like, hey, forest protections, the fight for indigenous rights, and then preservation of the culture, um, which mostly done also, like when you walk into the protest directly, lead the protest, or maybe you go into the forest, do some reforestation works, or maybe you confront the bulldozer and lodging companies, or even in the context of the cultural preservations, like in the Dayak, we have a lot of traditional rites and traditions and rituals, which means we gather together. But now, even in COVID situations, yeah, we have this challenge, because we can no longer practice it like freely, because the government limit uh, for people to gather together. So it's a really really big challenge, for indigenous community, I said. um, Somehow in other side, also for indigenous community, actually it should be safer than those who live in the city, because they're not so exposed to people, and also uh, with everything that we have, let's say in the village and in the forest, actually we have everything. I mean, you can have the food, you can get the fish, you can go hunting if you want, and there's no need like for being affected economically and so on by COVID. But somehow, actually, that's the ideal that I have in my head, and that's what's supposed to happen actually to indigenous community. But in fact, indigenous communities now become more vulnerable, because COVID situation affected people economically, and I guess it makes some people become more greedy, especially in the context of exploitations of our nature and also the violations of the rights of indigenous community. But anyway, if if I explains about how I started, I think it's quite longer. It's a long journey, but anyway, I started only as a community, as a common indigenous girl who has this passion for speaking on behalf of my communities, to people, and trying to change the narrative that people have about the indigenous community. They say the Dayak let's say primitive, and then like people who live in the forest, like naked and so on. A lot of this stigma and misconceptions about the Dayak. So I studied with this willingness. I want to change that. I want to change the narrative. I want to change all this misconception that people have toward the Dayak people and in general toward the indigenous community. But then when I learned more about my own identity as a Dayak, and then I visited so many villages and listen more to the stories of the elders and also from the leaders in the communities. And then I realized there is something bigger than only, um, like talking about my culture. We face these giants this day, that I can say, like this corporation, and then all these demands, consumption, irresponsible consumption and production, and also the greedy and corruption. And on the top of that, the indigenous communities are the ones the most affected by that thing. So even in Kalimantan, I see a lot of problems, a lot of violations of the indigenous rights, and then how the rainforest being cut down, being cleared. Like in the past 50 years, Kalimantan, Borneo Island, which has the one of the oldest rainforests in the world, has lost its rainforest more than like 50%. And then I see there is a lot of violations, like the farmers being arrested and sent to the jail, and all these policies and decisions making that made by government without involving the indigenous community, which then led into these environmental disasters. Like not only one environmental disaster, but the series of environmental disasters. So I feel there is a urgency for me personally as an indigenous person to step uh, beyond the understanding, but converting the ideas into an action. So that's how Ranuelum started, actually, from idea to action and then to movement.
Right. Uh, okay, just yeah. So one thing which is kind of about the fire, this question that you raised when I was there, you told me the whole question is who started the fire, and there is this misconception that. Like because we face the same problem here, the whole thing about slash and burn cultivation, which is an indigenous practice across the world,
Yeah.
and it has been found that slash and burn cultivation never really, it has been done for thousands of years across the world, and it never really destroyed forests the way it is being, the fires are destroying right now. And in fact, it is also believed that some of these practices were crucial to check big natural fires also, because this would burn out all the dry parts, and so there was some sort of controlled fire that indigenous people used to prevent big fires. But
Right.
now, as you say, that the whole blame is being, kind of engineered to be put upon the indigenous people. Uh, uh, can you just tell us more about that? Like how people are being sort of targeted, or
Mm-hmm.
rather, the blame is being put upon them, so that maybe the blame doesn't, so that the big corporations are not blamed. Is that what's happening?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. You mentioned that the slash and burn, and how it's actually an indigenous practices, and I know it's not only in Asia but also in like Native Americans people also do that practice. And actually, like when we talk about the fires, let's say forest fires and peatland fires, it's a bit complicated because so many people only see that from the perspective of, like climate change, and from the like, let's say, green activist or environmentalist perspective.
Right.
But if you want to look into this case like as whole, we will find how actually the misconceptions about the indigenous community actually lead into the mismanagements of the land, which of course contribute to the climate crisis that we are facing right now. So, like for example, in Kalimantan, we have these peat fires and forest fires started in 1997. So it means it's already 24 years. And every year it keeps coming back. And the funny thing was, because no one talk about it, no one understand why it happens. So people tend to be ignorant, and they think like, oh, that's normal. Yeah. And like even me, I have been living that way like for more than 20 years. So when 2015 big fires happen, and then it shocks the world, I guess, because there is this phrase, they say, uh, Palangkaraya, the city where I live, is the most polluted city in the world at the time because of these particulate matters that being produced by these pit fires, which is very very dangerous to the lung, because it can cause the lung cancer, and then stroke, and also heart attack. Yeah, but the fact is, Kalimantan people already experience this for 24 years every year, and there is no such words from a government or from anyone that actually it should not happen to Kalimantan. And like Kalimantan people, in this context Dayak people, does do not deserve this thing, like, because breathing is a very very basic rights, I guess. It's the right to live, like you breathe the air, you need the oxygen, and then it's being violated. So I guess also it's one of the turning point of my works, like my activism works, um because nothing will change until we do something. And sadly, yeah, indigenous communities is being blamed for these fires. Meanwhile, actually, in fact, the indigenous communities are the one who being worse affected by this forest fire. But the country will only like count the loss, like economic loss of this rainforest, and like peat and damaged land caused by that fires, and including some counts on the health impact. But what I see on the ground is more than that. It's not only about money. It's not only about economic values, or how much the loss that these countries suffer, but it's really about people who lose their loved ones because their parents, because their daughters died during the haze, the toxic haze at the time. And well, actually, the fire Surya already experienced it himself in 2018. But like Surya, whenever I recall that, actually I love in my head. I say like, oh my god, what was I doing at the time when like I broke Surya into this hell, and then I just quickly walk into the fires, and I left you behind. Sorry.
Yeah, that was. I went with. It was not your fault. I didn't wear shoes. I wore bathroom slippers, and I went into the forest thinking that I have a lot of experience in forest. I can just walk through it, because I did not know what a peat land forest would be like. And yeah.
Right, yeah. So that's one thing, I do not realize that, but I guess that's how I run in life. I mean, like, because you see like this massive big fires at the time, and I remember the police said it's like 100 hectares of the forest blazing at that night. And we have this like 50, more than 50 people, like the police, and also the soldiers, and also the villagers, all wake up all night till morning, trying to extinguish the fire. And uh, I will say like it's not a passion. I mean, like, maybe think it's people think it's weird, but for me, like living in such situations, sometimes you have to stay sane by doing the insane thing, like the weird thing. Because in 2015, the air pollution was really really bad. It's equal to smoking 672 cigarettes a day. Could you imagine how you can survive, like how you could hold on to your life with that kind of situation? So I just feel there is more urgency, like to put an end into this 24 forest fires, and this is something that we cannot do alone. I guess that's why we are here. We speak through this live talk, and also we have a lot of webinars and also some, like what I'm doing here with all the restoration efforts, and we do also some campaigns like boycott palm oil because palm oil contribute a lot into this cause. The forest fire happens like more than 50% of the hotspots in central Kalimantan are located in concession area of palm oil plantations. So we all responsible for that.
Right. So here I would just like to point out that India's palm oil consumption is the largest in the world, and not only that, the majority of the palm oil produced in Kalimantan, Sumatra, and the whole of Indonesia, as well as Malaysia, most of it is consumed by India. And the company, we have a very notorious corporation called Adani, and Adani has gone for a joint venture with Wilmar. And so in India, most of the edible oil, vegetable oil products, brands are now palm oil. And the thing is, not while in India there is a lot of criticism of this company called Adani because of its association with the right-wing Brahmin government of the BJP, and but there is not many people are aware of what how Adani is contributing to the deforestation in Kalimantan, as well as I also found out that India is also the biggest importer of coal from Indonesia. And all the coal that we see in burning in the thermal power plants of Odisha, where you have mining companies, most of the coal is coming from Indonesia. Even in fact, is there some audio problem?
No.
So, so in a way, the coal comes from there, and here they run the thermal power plant. That thermal power plant runs the mining company's smelter and refinery, so it is, I mean, if there is destruction in Borneo, then there is destruction in Orissa, so it's kind of connected. It's not isolated problems. These are very much connected problems, and I mean, that is why one feels that there is a big need for a united sort of front, or resistance, or however we call it, but at least for information to be shared between communities in Indonesia and India, those who are resisting the same corporations. I also found out that Tata, which has committed massacre and genocide in Odisha and Chhattisgarh, was actually going to do a massive power project in East Kalimantan. And one of the big aluminium companies of the government of India wanted to open an aluminium factory in, again, central Kalimantan. So those plans somehow got stalled, maybe, I don't know what happened, some geopolitical thing maybe, but these things are there and they might happen anytime. And what do you think, I mean, we can do about this? How, like this Indian consumption thing is something like China, okay, everybody understands that China consumes, this and that, but India is somehow kind of, I mean, when I say India, I mean the Indian government and the Indian capitalist.
Mm-hmm. Right. So, for your information, Indonesia is the biggest producer of the palm oil, the biggest exporter of palm oil, like globally, and the top importers of palm oil are India on the first place. It's 17.5 8% of the global total, and the second one is China. It's 10.8%. So like you said, actually everything is connected. I mean, even though we do not name that companies, everything is connected, because I believe everyone is responsible for what she or he does, like including the consumption itself. Why these palm oil industries like keep expanding? Because there is a lot of demand, and that's the very first thing that we need to understand clearly, because there is the demand, then there is a production, right? And it's interesting actually, Surya, when you mention those names of the companies, like, because honestly, like for me, I do not care about their names, like I do not care, and I don't even bother to look for their names, like, because um I once tried to do that in the past, and actually I was so much discouraged, because I have seen a lot of violations that being done by these companies to my people, you know. And when you mentioned what these companies do, and then how actually, like, they are big companies, right? In their capacity, like, it's almost impossible for us to beat them. And like you ask the questions, what can we do about that? This is very, very difficult question actually. What can we do about that? And I remember when I started to give the talk like this, like since 6 years ago, and then I said, like, this is the problem in Kalimantan, this is what's happening during forest fire, this is the violations of Dayak indigenous rights. And then the audience will ask this question, what can we do to help you? And then I have no idea. I don't know what to say to them. What can they do to help me? Or like, what can we do now? And some people will come with the idea of boycott palm oil, but uh, does it make any difference? That's also the question that I keep asking myself. I mean, let's say, like, I believe every small and single action matters, no matter how small it is. Even you do it only by yourself, like you're not like in the big capacity to boycott like a lot of products of palm oil products from uncertified palm oil companies. I always believe that makes difference. But what I concern most now is, what is the difference that my people can experience themselves, so they can tell that, hey, now we are fighting, and our fight is not in vain. Our fight is not just, like, empty and then just vaporize in the air. No, because honestly, I have seen that a lot here. Like, one thing that hit me hard was when I visited one village, and I met with this indigenous woman activist that has been fighting for the rights of our people, like, for almost 30 years, like 3 decades. Um, and she was a nurse actually, but now she was retired. Like, imagine, a nurse and then become an indigenous activist. So she has been through a lot of things, like including the death threat, and or like someone put the knife on her neck, and like her friends are being murdered. Like, she has been going through a lot. And I asked her, um uh, for these 3 decades you fight for the rights of indigenous people, is there any change? Is there any winning? I asked that question to her, and she said no. But before that, I asked her, how many organizations come to you and say they want to help you? A lot, she said. So imagine, in the past 30 years, there is a lot of organizations, foundations, activists, medias, and so on that try to, let's call it, help, try to help the indigenous communities. And this woman who has been fighting like tirelessly said no winning for the past 30 years. So there must be something wrong in the way we do that. I mean, maybe this is like too general, but I really want us to have this similar perspective, or maybe you may not agree with me, but at least I hope you will listen to what I think about how we can uh, fight this together. The solution actually should come from the ground up, right? Because when we talk about colonizations, it has been happening like since thousands years ago, and like for us indigenous communities, people from outside always consider themselves as a savior. They consider themselves as the helpers. They consider themselves as the one who can lighten the sufferings of indigenous community, which is actually not true, because before they come, we are not suffering, right? We didn't suffer at all, right? But because of this colonials come, and then um, all this capitalism ideology and exploitations and the violation happen, so everything changed for the indigenous community. So if we want to solve the problems, we need to look into the roots of the problem. This is also something that I mentioned in my book. What is the root of our problem? um, Maybe the context, like in the Dayak community, with the context of what the Adivasi communities in India, or maybe Dongria Kon community in Niamgiri experience is different, like different to us, or like maybe other indigenous community in other part of the world also, they have different kind of problems. But the way we face that, I always feel the strong connections, and actually we have that power. I said the solution should come from the ground up. That's why it's really important for us. If we say we want to do something about it, we need to empower and support the community first. Because if we say, okay, campaign, okay, you can do that. Protest, all right, you can do that. Or maybe you want to do a lawsuit, citizen lawsuit. All right, yeah, that's also a good idea. But the true winning is when you support, empower, and do all that you can do to strengthen the community, so they can rise up and have this confidence in themselves, like, hey, we are done with this, and we don't want to be colonialized anymore, right? So it's related also to our topic today, like de-colonise. So I really believe if we want to have a change in society, we need to change people. Maybe we cannot change the mind of the owner of Tata or uh, Adani, like all these investors. Like, it's hard, it's difficult, and if we keep thinking about that and then say like, oh, it's impossible, and then we get discouraged, and at the end we do nothing, right? But let's see what we can do now. We can change our approach to that, and then we can educate the younger generation. We can use our resources. If you are an indigenous, and then you have a lot of skills and knowledge and educations, you go back to your community and help them to be resilient, whether it is in the economy, or maybe in education, or whatever that you can do. Or maybe you are not an indigenous, you use your resources to support the community. That's the very first thing that needs to be done, and then the others will follow. Because yeah, I really believe like the root should be solved first. And the root of all this problem is colonializations. Now we have these modern colonializations. It seems like helping, it seems like supporting, but actually not. They say like, hey, we want to give you a better life, so we develop something here. But actually they only like want to get money and clear the forest and destroy all the livelihood from the indigenous communities, right? And they say, hey, that's for a better life. that's for the improvement of your life quality, they say. But actually it's not. It's under the name of development. So what is the definitions of helping indigenous community? Actually, that's also something that I want to question to everyone that watch this talk or listen to what I'm saying right now. What is the definition of helping? What is the definition of supporting? What is the definition of activism, especially for those who maybe think they are superior than the indigenous communities? Because if we want to support or like help the communities, but we still have the same mindset like those capitalist leaders, those owners of these big companies, and then nothing will change. um Sorry if that's long, so yeah, I think that's what I can think. I mean, like, it's really important for us to really understand this, like, wholly, not only like, hey, how I can kick out the company from my land. Yeah, it's more than that. Yeah, because this is a long journey, right?
Absolutely. I mean, your points are very well taken. In fact, what my lesson today is as you said, that to remember the name of these companies and to go crazy thinking about that. That's a bit, yeah. That's what has to learn
Well, yeah, when
to.
you experience
Yeah.
it yourself, right? Being an activist is not easy, right? Being someone who fights for rights and for justice is really exhausting, not only physically but mentally. And if you cannot survive that for the long time, and then yeah, that's or your effort will be in vain, right? So
There's one thing that really struck me here is that something that just to contextualize it, I have been working with indigenous peoples movements in Odisha, but my social location is that I come from the class that is the colonial class of India, that is the Brahmin caste, and so I am very much part of that uh, class or community which has been colonizing and for like 2000 years. And when somebody like me tries to come and extend let's say support or solidarity to Adivasi movements and Dalit movements, it yeah, there is of it's a very kind of a thin line where one is being a real friend and when one is being like somebody who's appropriating and taking over and becoming the voice of the
mhm, mhm,
people. And
mhm,
this is one sees it very widely also. And the gaze of let's say if we talk about filmmaking, so the Brahmin filmmakers gaze or the white filmmakers gaze, it has an inherent colonial aspect to it. And of course it is I mean it's not the burden is not upon the indigenous communities to educate the Brahmin or the white person. But how much of is it a problem? Because I feel since a large amount of stories and films and writing about indigenous issues is from the good colonial person,
yeah.
so that do you think it's very important to break through that clutter and to like really I mean, for all of us to kind of move aside and
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm sure it's very important. Like right now, just to let you know, also like right now, I'm doing a live streaming through Instagram page of Indigenous Film Fest Kalimantan. So the name of the our section is Through Our Land. So we have this like live talk also called Through Our Lens. Because we want to change the narrative. I mentioned that, and one also of the objective of these indigenous film festivals also to bring more stories from indigenous perspectives and to decolonize through filmmaking, right? And if we see like mostly the narratives now being told by outsiders, right? So I will not say like it's a really bad thing, but at some point it can be very crucial, and it affects the communities a lot. And as an indigenous person myself, I feel it's just not fair, like when you as a human being just being put into the frame that made by someone else, you are being molded by someone else according to their needs and their benefits and for their advantage, right? So we already have our natures being exploited, right? And then because we are facing this climate crisis right now, which is a very very huge problem and has become a global problem, where all the world leaders and all the monies from nations being put into the effort to combat climate change. So these people start to shift to exploit the cultures and the indigenous identity of us, I say. So, what is the difference with the exploitation of the nature? It's just similar. It's just a different form of colonialization, different form of exploitations. Um, Somehow here, I'm not talking about their motives, right? I'm talking about the impact of the works that they do, because well, I have met some people that have these good intentions, but just because they are born like as a white person, or maybe as someone who are not familiar with indigenous communities, so they have their own frame and then try to put the indigenous community into their frames, and then they get money, right? I mean, I said like, okay, it's not your fault, but this is the time I educate you. You should not do that if you really want to work for for humanity and like work together with indigenous communities. So I guess here in this context, when we as an indigenous filmmakers say, hey, we want to tell our own story, it's not like we oppose your story from the perspective of an outsider, but we just give you another perspective, and it's up to them whether they want to accept it or not. But at least you should not limit our voice. You should not shut us down. So that's why I feel, um, in the similar way, when we try to solve the problems that caused by all these big giant companies, like, it's not it's not to beat them, like it's not to knock them down, but we just come out as their competitor. I feel that, like for example, like why people work for the companies, why some people, some villagers sell their land, because of the poverty, because they need money to pay for their children educations, to buy food for their families, right? And even in the past, they can get the food from the forest, but the government just cleared the forest and built, like shopping mall and houses, and then they lose their livelihood. They say, oh, we need money. So all the system put the indigenous communities in that situation. And some people will say, hey, you should not work for the companies, you should uh, go against the company, you should not sell your land, but they do nothing to help the community to increase their income, to survive, to be sustainable in their livelihood. So it's nothing, like it doesn't work and nothing will change, right? So what we need to do is to provide another alternative solutions that can be a solution, like being a competitor to these companies. Maybe it's still a small scale, but at least it's worth to try. So in the same way, with storytelling, we have these people that give the stories from their perspective. Like the Dayak, they always say, hey, the Dayak eat human. They say, oh, the Dayak eating human flesh. Oh, the Dayak do not wear any clothes. Like, oh, they are primitive, like monkey living in the forest. That's what they say, because they got the limited informations about us. I mean, it's all made by people who do not really know about us, or at least because they live in the city, so they look at us in that way. So what we want to do is not to oppose them, pointing finger to them, being angry to them, boycott them and kick them. All right, but what we do is, this is our story, this is our truth, this is what you can um learn from us, from our sides, like, because life is always like this. Life always have these two sides, right? But it's your choice to choose which one that you want to believe, and on which side you want to stand, right? So I really believe that there should be a breakthrough in this. So that's why also we train a lot of young people to be able to use camera to tell their stories. Like I said, you should not like enter the film school to be a filmmaker. Like, I said, like, just use your phone, and then you share your story, you share about your community, you show them your daily life. Yeah, maybe it's only 5 people watching, but it can be also like 5,000 people watching. At least you share about yourself, and then you're being empowered, and you know, like, you are being heard and being listened. So that's how we change this narrative, I guess so. And um yeah, just want to let you know that right now also we are preparing for Indigenous Film Festival Kalimantan. We have been doing this since 2015, and now we are getting bigger. And when we first started, we just started like 7 people in a small house, and with very limited tools. At the time, we watch a film and then we have discussion. I still remember that it's like about 7 or 8 years ago. But nowadays, we have the audience from 12 countries and 4 continents watching for films from Kalimantan. So that's a progress, right? So when people like 7 years ago, they thought that the Dayak are primitive and like nothing but living like monkey. That's what they thought in the past. But now they change their perspective, say like, oh, the Dayak just like us, normal persons. Or like 7 years ago, people thought that, oh, the Dayak destroy the forest because they do hunting, so they are the reason why some species being extinct. I know some environmentalists think that way, right? But when they listen to our stories, like, now they understand, like, the Dayaks are not the destroyer but the guardians of the forest. We are the ones that keep the biodiversity here in rainforest of Kalimantan. So we need to open our mind and our hearts more to this kind of perspective. Whether you're indigenous or not. If you're indigenous, I encourage you to do more storytelling. Don't let people define you, don't let people mold you into what they want, right? But it doesn't mean also we have to be like very defensive, because I found out also it's not good to be like very defensive. Some people can be very conservative and very defensive, like they consider the outsider storytellers as their enemies. It's not good, right? I mean, if you can put your energy into something good, why not? Yeah, why should you put your energy into an anger? Yeah, I guess it works in the activism context as well. Just pour out your energy into something that will make a change, not only just boom, vaporize in the air. Yeah.
That's very true. In fact, yeah, I mean, as you said, it would be good for the those who have good intentions and but are coming from the colonial class to actually listen. And we have been talking for a very long time. Like in India's context, on both sides, it's the Brahmin always talking. Like in Orissa also, when for me personally, just to I had this understanding from the very beginning, and I had no intention actually of going to make. I had making films in Niyamgiri or Kalinganagar. The whole idea was to start train people. I mean, just share the skills and knowledge that I have. But what I realized is that uh, the society was such that they kind of encourage the colonizer to also speak uh, on behalf of the colonized, because all the media and everything is again,
Yeah.
so I fell into that trap also myself, and for a few years, I became like, wow, I'm doing a great thing, I'm going to save the people and this and that. And there's a lot of encouragement and applause, and the people you get it, one gets invited to many more places,
Yeah.
and one realized that. There is the reason is that maybe because the criticism and everything, it's when it comes from the colonial class, it is
Mm,
like the arrow is not very sharp, and one is just
mm,
has all this pretentious anger.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But
Yeah,
yeah,
that's
I
true.
mean, having experienced the film festivals, uh, it's really amazing, the way all of your, I mean, you and your team have been organizing the film festivals. It where, along with cinema, there is so much of cultural expression in the way the music and the dance is used, not as a spectacle for the audience to just sit and watch, but as a way of
Mm,
really, reclaiming that space. That is
mm-hmm.
really, I really appreciate that, and
Yeah.
there's lots to learn from there. Because
Mm-hmm.
here in Odisha, we have been witnessing that the way the government and the civil society has been using the culture of the indigenous people just as a museum object. So
Yes.
we have a tribal museum, and where all the non-indigenous people go and watch statues,
Mm-hmm.
costumes,
Yeah.
and
Well, it
you
happens
know
also here. I think it happens
yeah,
everywhere.
yeah. So
They
that
make
sort of a
reference.
museumization is, I mean, I find it very unbearable. I mean, because we don't have a colonial museum of colonizers, where we can see the colonizer, statue and costume, and all these things, and the way they eat and all that kind of a thing. I mean, that sort of an anthropological study is not happening, and maybe that is where people like me should be doing. We should be, looking at our own communities and doing anthropological study of why, the. But anyway, so can you tell us more about the upcoming film festival?
All right. Yeah. So for the upcoming film festivals, it will be held online, and because like right now still like the COVID situation is not it's not stable here, right? So we will have these festivals along with the commemoration of the World Indigenous People Day in August. So the plan is to have this like 1 week with all exhibition and also open stage to celebrate our culture. And I really believe it's really important for people to listen more to the indigenous stories, to the films that being told by the indigenous community or indigenous filmmakers themselves. And for these years, we have the festival with the theme Earth Protectors, and with the tagline is "Heal the land, heal the future." So we decided to choose that theme because especially in the past 2 years, Kalimantan suffers a lot of environmental disasters. Like we struggle with fires and haze for 24 years, but since last year 2020 and then this year, just the beginning of this year, we faced these environmental disasters like flood. Yeah, like 65,000 people should be evacuated, and like one village being destroyed by landslide. Like this is something that never happened before in Kalimantan. So everyone should realize that we are really like in this phase, in this stage of climate emergency right now. Like we have this climate change and then climate crisis and climate emergency. It means we have to act now. So we want to highlight the stories of those people from indigenous communities who are the protectors of the earth, and we want to highlight the roles of indigenous community in keeping the forest, in protecting the forest. And Surya, I also like recall my visit to, I think, Sandakpur village, right, last time in 2019, because I look into the footage that I took at the time, and it was said like how the communities in that village actually protected their forest, like 3,000 hectares of the forest, because the government want to build the shopping mall. I think at the time there, so like the 25 of them will be like in guard day and night, and then have this shifting in turn, like 25 people will go back to the village and other 25 people will go to be in guard. So when I watched the footage that I took in Sandapur village at the time, it's like, oh yeah, it encouraged me a lot, like, and like these stories that we want to highlight, these stories of those people that they do not have this like recognitions, like global recognitions or like award, green heroes or whatever it is, uh, just like many white activists receive, I guess. They do not get a lot of like coverage of the media, but they are there for earth, they are there for nature, they are there for the forest, and it's important for people outside there to know about these silent heroes, to know about their fights. And one thing also, I believe there are so many people that want to contribute into the better planet, in the context of the climate and also humanity. In that sense, uh, it's important for us to tell the world about what's happening and show them the way how they can work together with us as our partner, as our allies, because yeah, we need to be together in this. This is a big fight, right? This is the fight of everyone. We cannot do this alone. This is not only the fight of the indigenous communities, this is the fight of all of us, because when the indigenous communities lost their forest, it means also we lost the guardians of the forest. So yeah, I encourage everyone to stay tuned with us. The submission already closed, so right now we are in the process of selections. But the festival will happen just in I think like less than 2 months, yeah, in August. So stay tuned with us. Get that.
Great. In fact, I'm very happy that many filmmakers from India are also sending films to the festivals. I think, yeah, Cyril's film. In fact, I saw Cyril's film on in your festival from. And, yeah, that was
Awesome.
good. Yeah. In fact, there are some of our friends who are watching this. If they have anything to ask, maybe they could send in the chat box the questions. In fact, there are some people that you would know. There is Pratik who was watching, then Ananta, Suraj, and yeah, the three of them you have met. They were here watching. They
Yeah.
have sent their
Oh, I miss
messages.
you guys.
So I guess since it will go on YouTube, people can watch it later on also.
Oh yeah.
But if
So
anything would like,
is it on YouTube right now? I try to find out, but my other phone is there. I think later you can share the link so I can share also.
yeah, it's on YouTube. It's
Yeah,
going live.
like now, right?
Yeah, I tried for having it live on YouTube and Facebook at the same time, but again, these corporations want you to pay for that, so they're saying only you can go live in one thing at one point of time. So
Yeah. Yeah. I think like through this talk, I feel there is a lot of advantage as well, like, because like it encourages us to keep communicating even though like long distance, also different time zone. And I really hope for more solidarity, actually, because like for me myself, I learned a lot from other communities. I learned a lot from you guys. I learned a lot from the Kon community through the visit, and also other indigenous communities. And whether it is about their struggles or about their fight, yeah, I learned a lot. And for me, I always try to convert my self reflections into something that I can do. Maybe we will not see like immediate change, but something happened. Just believe something is happening, even though that's a small thing. And I want us to not underestimate the small beginnings. I remember, I think the first time we met in Bali, right, Surya? You and Dinja, yeah, we met first in 2018 at the time, and we never expect, right? Like we can build more solidarity like this. I visit you guys visit us, and then we have some collaborations and build more awareness and support each other. I think that's very, very crucial part in this effort to decolonize and to fight for indigenous rights. So I really hope for more collaborations. Yeah, not only between us, but with also other indigenous communities in other part of the world. We need to come together with this. And also, I want to encourage the indigenous youth in Odisha as well. Sometimes when when you said like leading youth, I feel so old. Sometimes I do not realize that, like some people invite me, they say like, okay, talk over youth session, and then I realize I'm not young anymore. So I listen like, okay, I have these guys like some leaders. Okay, you guys talk about it. But yeah, I just feel so inspired by so many young people these days, especially in our community. Um, like 16 years old, 17 years old, and they say like, hey, I want to do something, even though they do not know what to do. But at least they have this willingness, and I really hope this also happened to the indigenous youth in Odisha. Yeah, I really hope that we can build more communication and solidarity. We have a lot of access with digital things right now, so let's make use of that.
Great. Yeah, in fact, due to the lockdown, Madan and Punya, and they are not here.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it would have appreciated if they were also part of the discussion. And actually, Niyamgiri still does not have internet access. And in fact, that's what I wanted to come to. Actually, it's maybe it's getting a bit late, but one of the last things is that like the lockdown, one saw how indigenous people living in remote places got deprived of education and the digital divide, as they're calling it, and. I have seen like all our friends in Niyamgiri are they had a tough time. They have to find a particular on a particular mountain where they can have access.
Hey,
And
that's something also that we have in Kalimantan. That's the problem.
yeah, it's like Madan has to go and trek for a
Yeah,
couple of hours
climbing
and find a place.
trees,
Yeah,
sitting
yeah,
nearby the rivers. Uh,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. Well, I
But
just also
yeah, what is
yeah, maybe sorry. Yeah,
yeah,
and
please
maybe
go ahead.
if you guys want, like, you can join our webinars. Later, I will send you the link because like when we talk about the problems like during the COVID and education also. Like indigenous community always face the same problem. We do not really have internet access, right? And with this online system, it's crazy, and yeah, actually we need to do something about that. So that's why also me and my team, we develop this alternative for digital offline learning kit for students in the remote area. I mean, I just want to say like this is one example of what you can do when you see the problems. Think about how to solve that, even though it sounds a bit weird or like ridiculous or funny, but it's worth to try. So maybe if anyone from you guys wanted to join later, I can send the link of the webinar. So maybe that's something that some people want to maybe do also there. Like without internet access, you still can learn. Yeah.
That would be really good. I will, in fact, talk to Madan and share the. I will take the link from you and share with him because we need to figure a way out, and somehow we have not been able to find a way to deal with it. And
Yeah.
yeah, okay, great. So there's one question from our friend Avipsha who is wanting to know. I'll just put it up again.
Mhm. Right.
Is it?
Okay. Hi, Abhishek. Thank you for the question. Yeah, I'm safe here, but somehow I haven't got my vaccine yet. The process of vaccine people to get people being vaccinated is so slow here, and the number of the COVID case still increase. But till now, I'm still safe. I do not travel also, and I'm still at home. Um, and what is the questions like? Affect the Can you just, yeah, has added to everyday challenges there. Yeah, I also mentioned this like in the beginning of this talk, like pandemic really affects people in so many ways, and indigenous communities also being one of the most vulnerable, let's say in economic and then in education and in health also. Somehow the number of the cases, COVID cases, it's like it's more in the city rather than in the village. Yeah, but something that we here in Indonesia face is really about the economic, in economic sector, because you cannot work as usual. Like there is this regulation from government, which is not fair. Some people say it, and it makes it more difficult for people to get the job and get the money. Yeah, but for us, as our organizations work in that media stuffs, like I said, I feel this situation right now in the pandemic also make us more productive. uh, and produce more content, more webinars, more talk. Like I just feel where there is a problem, where there is a pain, and then it's like trigger you to do something more. Yeah, maybe our adrenaline. We feel like, okay, right now we cannot do a protest because there should not be a crowd. Government said, okay, we launch these online petitions, and we like blast our social media with our voices. So the challenges is still there, and for the indigenous community, especially people um, with low income, it becomes like twice harder. But yeah, we still try to figure out how actually we can uh, not help the community. I will say how we can be resilient in this kind of situation, because I always believe like the communities, the indigenous community have this power inside of them, and sometimes the difficult situations, or like let's say hardship, it will make you think about something creative and how you can solve the problem that you face. Like for me personally, it happens. Yeah, I become more creative and productive right now, despite of all these challenges. But of course, we hope this pandemic is over soon. Um, yeah, not only here but also in other part of the world. I think like some countries already gets normals, like because they are vaccinated already, and then they no longer wear mask in other some countries. But yeah, um a lot of challenges, but we still can overcome it. Yeah, I guess it's no different with previous challenges when we face these companies. I mean, almost there is no difference. Like pandemic or no pandemic, the companies is still there, violate the rights of indigenous communities. So I just feel like, okay, now I have to think like more creative, like to tackle them in digital way.
Yeah, that's true. Very true. In fact, I think some countries like Thailand have also started their tourism sector. They have opened up.
Yeah, yeah. That's true.
Yeah, so great. In fact, what I really appreciate is that Shinta, that you are able to always smile and laugh at the face of all kinds of adversity, and that's really inspiring. And although when I said youth leader, in India, all youth leaders are usually in their 40s. Most of the communist parties, they have this. I mean, nothing about age, but yeah. I mean, though I did not mean it that way.
Yeah, like being in this field, let's say activism. Yeah, I said we need to stay sane, and I feel like more encouragement also, because I see so many people care. Like my mental breakdown happened, I think like 2 years ago. uh because I listened to the stories of those who are arrested, and then how like they could do nothing to fight for their land. But then when I saw some young people, they said like, hey, we want to do something about this. We want to improve our lives. We want to help our building our village. And then it's also an encouragement for me myself. I guess that's why I'm still able to work and do this day to day and still smile. Sometimes the funny thing also when I smile and become like a bit like silly, actually that means I'm tired.
I think I know that.
No, we need that. Yeah, Surya, we need that. So I send a lot of power and love also to all the indigenous activists and all those who fights for the rights of the indigenous communities and fight for this earth, fight for humanity. There, this is a big fight. So, yeah, if you want to rest, just take a rest, but do not stop. I guess that's what I want to say.
Thank you for that, Shinta. And there was a message from Dinja also. She wanted to be part of it, but somehow today evening she had to go back to the village. And yeah, so otherwise I was trying to see if Madan could help her, to be part of this discussion. And yeah, let's see, maybe in the future we can have. So the thing is, I also want to tell you that, in the upcoming weeks, we'll have other friends also, like including Heriberto from Ecuador, whose films.
All right.
Yeah. The thing is that Google Translate is the only way I can, but we have found a translator. So it's a lot, he's in Ecuador and there's a bit of a time difference, 12 hours. So let's see how it works out. But it's very good that we have started the series with you. So yeah, it's
I'm definitely going to watch it. Thank you also, Surya. I'm so happy also when you mentioned like, hey, we want to have this talk discussion. I was like, oh yeah, now we started.
Yeah, because it's always very inspiring to talk to you. So I thought if we start, with you, then it will carry on. Otherwise, it would have just maybe stopped.
Fighting.
Great. So okay, so hope to see more of films from Ranuvelum, and really appreciate the new one. And even the last ones, we hope that we can also organize an indigenous film festival soon, maybe an online version here.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, and to be able to bring these films to our people here.
Yes.
And okay, so great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
So much.
Please stay safe, stay healthy.
Yeah.
I miss everyone. Regard from Kalimantan.
Great. So more power to you. And well, it's an ongoing conversation, so I don't know how to end it.
Okay, I will just leave the studio. Yeah. Bye bye everyone. Tabe selamat kamalem. Hatala mampahayak itah uras. Bye bye.
Thank you, friends who have joined us. See you next week. We were also trying to have talks on other days, and yeah. So until the next time, see you. Bye.